In the prelude to the Thrawn campaign, after the victories by the New Republic securing Coruscant, eliminating Warlord Zinj, and clearing Warlord Trait and Pterodox Greater Maldrude out of most of the Mid-Rim, it seemed as though the New Republic had won the war against the Empire entirely. Imperial splitter factions remained around the galaxy, none more powerful than the Pentastar alignment of the Northern Outer Rim under the leadership of Artus Cain, but infighting continued to prevent a united front against the New Republic juggernaut. And despite victories by Admiral Akbar pushing to planets like Ord Mantell and Agamar nearly on the alignment's borders, Cain retained his official position of neutrality, and few others could challenge the New Republic's growing hegemony on their own. With their Imperial enemies seemingly subdued, the New Republic turned to the job of governance, expanding trade routes between their worlds and working to repair damage done over the course of the Galactic Civil War. This was made more difficult as political fractures within the New Republic, united before by a common enemy, began to show, whether because of ideological differences posed by individuals like the Rhodian warlord Navik the Red's atrocities, making him a fine partner during the rebellion, but not in actually running the galaxy, or because more energy started going towards politicking for personal power, like in the case of Councillor Borsk Phalia, whose work had brought the instrumental Bothan Spynet into the rebellion, but who harbored a political vendetta against Supreme Commander Akbar in particular. Individuals became more concerned with making sure they had power within the New Republic than with making sure the New Republic was able to retain that power. In short, the New Republic would soon begin to be held down politically by infighting and militarily by the need to defend and administrate a massive territory, while the Empire, reduced though their forces were, was freed from many of those same responsibilities which had held them back before. It was in this context that Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Chiss Grand Admiral renowned for his strategic brilliance, quietly made his return from his assignment in the Unknown Regions to the Empire, where the ruling council, under the de facto leadership of Ars Dangor, was operating from the new capital of Orinda. Thrawn quickly began small operations, engaging in hit-and-fade tactics with Star Destroyers, doing localized damage and disappearing before any possible response from the New Republic, and giving pause to many systems which may have been considering joining the New Republic on their own. This approach was noted by information broker and smuggling kingpin Talon Card as being a novel strategy for the Empire, which typically used Star Destroyers for massive shows of force. One of these early attacks was in the Draukes system, still a few months before the beginning of any full-scale campaign by Thrawn, and taking place in the territory close to where the main fighting over Zinj's former empire had occurred, so it was an area which, at least theoretically, was still up for grabs for multiple factions. Several of these attacks had led to rumors within the New Republic of a military genius waiting in the wings, but prevailing sentiment was still that the war was won and that all resources could be turned towards liking this video and subscribing for more. Thrawn gets a lot of credit for that military genius even though he hasn't subscribed yet, but especially in these earlier stages, his political maneuvering is what really set the Empire up for success, starting with how he worked within the Empire and then extending to how he manipulated the New Republic, which we'll cover in future videos. Thrawn was able to accomplish what no Imperial since Endor was able to do: unite most Imperial forces under one leader. His reputation in simply having a Grand Admiral working to bring the Imperials back together won the support of the rank-and-file Imperial military everywhere, including in the Pentastar Patrol, the military arm of the Alignment, forcing Cain to begrudgingly put the Alignment's forces under Thrawn's control, albeit reluctantly and only to a limited degree. Cain's flagship, the Executor-class Reaper, was withheld, for example. A similar situation developed throughout the Empire and other Imperial splinter territories, with the Moff Council and Prince Admiral Delek Krenel of the Kutric hegemony also giving Thrawn nominal control over their forces, but in practice keeping the bulk of them behind. No matter how much the scattered Imperial military were clamoring to support Thrawn, local rulers were more concerned with the possibility of an attack by their supposed allies, or even presumably of Thrawn himself usurping all of them. This left Thrawn with only 12 Star Destroyers under his direct control for the opening stages of his operations, of which 6 would form his primary core, having proven themselves firmly loyal. These were the Judicator, Peremptory, Death's Head, Nemesis, Starhawk, and finally Captain Gilad Pellion's Chimera, which Thrawn took as his own flagship. These, along with a variety of supporting Carrack, strike cruisers, and other smaller vessels, may not have seemed like enough to take down the New Republic, while the bulk of the remaining forces were jealously guarded in fear of sneak attacks by other Imperials, attacks which had notably mostly stopped under Thrawn's leadership, but Thrawn would put them all to creative use and have a major impact. One ship type which did see increasingly pronounced usage under Thrawn was the Lancer frigate, a dedicated anti-fighter ship which had been spurred into production by the Rebel success at Yavin after a long prior development, though until Thrawn it had still been largely sidelined. This is an indication of how well Thrawn understood the reliance in the New Republic on fighter tactics, and more importantly an indication that he did not want his few capital ships to start exploding. He was ultimately still very limited in both manpower and ships, and fixing that situation would be a driving motivation behind most of his campaign. His early plans, though, required more subtlety than massive shows of force. On top of the cooling effect on planets' desire to join a New Republic seemingly unable to protect them, Thrawn's hit and fade tactics would have served as a training exercise for his own forces. The years since Endor had broken the spirit of some of the more experienced subordinates Thrawn still had, like Pellaeon, but at the lower ranks there was a notable lack of experience and discipline, something both he and Pellaeon lamented, and which became more and more true as the Empire was forced to rely on conscripts. Much like the rebellion before them and the New Republic in the final years of the Yuuzhan-Vong War would prove, a series of successful hit-and-fade strikes could provide a significant confidence boost, as well as invaluable field experience. The most important of these early battles began in the Obroa-skai system, where an Ubictorate base, basically a huge space library, was raided by Thrawn in the hopes of finding the location of Wayland, a planet which was home to a storehouse of technology which would prove vital to Thrawn's later operations. The raid was undertaken by Thrawn himself on Chimera and went without incident, but the New Republic was finally able to catch up with Chimeras soon after. A task force of 4 assault frigates and 3 wings of X-Wings, led by an Eloman commander, managed to catch up with the lone Star Destroyer. Captain Pellaeon wanted to run, but Thrawn instead chose to engage, testing the enemy commander with a sentry ship, which the comics represent as a TIE fighter, but to me this always seemed more likely to be something like a probe droid in the books. But either way, getting the information he did from this sentry ship, Thrawn chose to use a modified Marg Sable maneuver. Thrawn turned his Star Destroyer so the command structure pointed towards the assault frigate and the hangar directly away, allowing the fighters to fly out, covered by the Chimera, and approaching from multiple directions after leaving the hangar. This led to a somewhat unpredictable and unstructured attack profile, which Thrawn claimed was beyond the comprehension of Eloman, who think more two-dimensionally. The entire task force was quickly destroyed and marked one of the first real conflicts between Thrawn himself and an organized military unit of the New Republic. The loss turned into something of an embarrassment for the New Republic government. Han Solo, who was trying to recruit smugglers to operate legitimate shipping lines, found his former connections, who were already hesitant to join the New Republic given Akbar's staunchly anti-smuggling stance, to be even more reluctant now that the rumblings of Imperial revitalization had been backed up by an undeniable victory. The New Republic still didn't know who exactly was behind these attacks, but the more connected smugglers like Tal and Karrde had been able to figure it out, and they would eventually give that information to the New Republic via Han Solo and Lando Calrissian. For Thrawn, the victory was more important for the information he gained from Obroa-skai. He was finally able to track down the location of Wayland, and after a brief stopover on Merkir, the home of Karrde's base of operations, to pick up some Isalamari, a type of creature able to nullify the Force in an area around them, Thrawn headed to Wayland to pick up his prizes. The Emperor's storehouse was protected by Jorus C'baoth, a clone of the Jedi Master Joruus C'baoth, with the clone having gone mad and established himself as the ruler of the nearby villages. C'baoth wanted to kill the interlopers and tried to use the Force to kill Thrawn and Pellaeon, which the Isalamari prevented. The self-styled Jedi Master was surprised by this and agreed to a tenuous alliance with the Grand Admiral. Thrawn would leave the negotiations with not just the storehouse but also C'baoth's direct cooperation in coordinating his fleets using battle meditation. In exchange, Thrawn had promised C'baoth new students. Specifically, Thrawn intended to hand over Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa Solo for Jedi training under C'baoth, with Thrawn also throwing in that Leia was pregnant with 2 probably Force-sensitive twins, something that C'baoth found incredibly interesting. The first attempt to capture the twin pair of twins was made on the planet Bimisari, where Luke, Han, and Leia had gone to negotiate with the hero-worshipping Bims, using their star power from the Rebellion days to try to convince the Bims to join the New Republic. Negotiations, which were short, Thrawn's personal commando squads attacked the trio. This squad consisted of Nogri from the planet Honoghr, which the Empire had tricked into believing Vader was their savior, owing Vader, and then after Vader's death Thrawn, their undying loyalty for the Empire saving their planet from an ecological disaster that the Empire was actually furthering. This will become very important later. The Jedi escaped capture, abandoning the negotiations, but while Thrawn had failed to fulfill his part of the deal so far, on top of securing the Jedi Master who would effectively coordinate his forces even without direct communication, he had gained 2 pieces of very important technology. Working cloaking devices, which would become a key component in drawing worlds away from the New Republic, and Sparty cloning cylinders, which he could use to supplement his severely lacking manpower. A new clone war was about to begin. That's going to do it for our first animated breakdown in the Thrawn campaign. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to the patrons and the channel members whose support make this kind of video possible. Leaving a like, subscribing for more, or sharing the video around is always appreciated. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you next time.